The House of York was a cadet branch of the English royal House of Plantagenet. 3 of its members became kings of England in the late 15th century. The House of York was descended in the male line from Edmund of Langley, 1st Duke of York, the 4th surviving son of Edward III, but also represented Edward's senior line, being cognatic descendants of Lionel, Duke of Clarence, Edward III's 2nd surviving son. It is based on these descents that they claimed the English crown. Compared with the House of Lancaster, it had a senior claim to the throne of England according to cognatic primogeniture but junior claim according to the agnatic primogeniture. Descent from Edward III. Edmund of Langley, 1st Duke of York, 1st Earl of Cambridge, KG was a younger son of King Edward III of England and Philippa of Hainault, the 4th of their 5 sons who lived to adulthood. He was the founder of the House of York, but it was through the marriage of his younger son, Richard to Anne Mortimer that the Yorkist faction in the Wars of the Roses made its claim on the throne. The other party in the Wars of the Roses, the Lancasters, were descendants of Edmund's brother, John of Gaunt, whose son Henry usurped the throne of Richard II in 1399. Edmund had 2 sons, Edward, and Richard of Königsberg. Edward succeeded to the dukedom in 1402, but was killed at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, with no issue. Richard married Anne Mortimer, a great-granddaughter of Lionel of Antwerp, the 2nd son of Edward III. Furthermore, Anne's son Richard also became heir general to the earldom of March, after her only brother, Edmund, 5th Earl, died without issue in 1425. Their father Roger Mortimer, 4th Earl of March, had been named heir presumptive of Richard II before Henry IV's accession. Although it had been passed over at the time, Anne's son Richard also inherited this claim to the throne. Richard of Königsberg was executed following his involvement in the Southampton plot to depose Henry V of England in favour of the Earl of March. The Dukedom of York therefore passed to his son, Richard Plantagenet. Through his mother, Richard Plantagenet also inherited the lands of the Earldom of March, as well as the Mortimer claim to the throne. Wars of the Roses. Despite his elevated status, Richard Plantagenet was denied a position in government by the advisers of the weak Henry VI, particularly John Beaufort, 1st Duke of Somerset, and the Queen Consort, Margaret of Anjou. Although he served as protector of the realm during Henry VI's period of incapacity in 1453-54, his reforms were reversed by Somerset's party once the king had recovered. The Wars of the Roses began the following year, with the First Battle of St. Albans. Initially, Richard aimed only to purge his Lancastrian political opponents from positions of influence over the king. It was not until October 1460 that he claimed the throne for the House of York. In that year the Yorkists had captured the king at the Battle of Northampton, but victory was short-lived. Richard and his 2nd son Edmund were killed at the Battle of Wakefield on December 30. Richard's claim to the throne was inherited by his son Edward. With the support of Richard Neville, 16th Earl of Warwick, Edward, already showing great promise as a leader of men, defeated the Lancastrians in a succession of battles. While Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou were campaigning in the north, Warwick gained control of the capital and had Edward declared king in London in 1461. Edward strengthened his claim with a decisive victory at the Battle of Toclan in the same year, in the course of which the Lancastrian army was virtually wiped out. Reigns of the Yorkist kings. The early reign of Edward IV was marred by Lancastrian plotting and uprisings in favour of Henry VI. Warwick himself changed sides, and supported Margaret of Anjou and the king's jealous brother George, Duke of Clarence, in briefly restoring Henry in 1470-71. However, Edward regained his throne, and the House of Lancaster was all but wiped out with the last male, Henry VI himself, murdered in the Tower of London in 1471. In 1478, the continued trouble caused by Clarence caused him to be executed in the Tower of London. Popularly he is thought to have been drowned in a butt of Manzi wine. On Edward's death in 1483, the crown passed to his 12-year-old son Edward. Edward IV's younger brother Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was appointed protector, and escorted the young king, and his brother Richard, to the Tower of London. The famous princes in the Tower were never seen again. However, it is unknown whether they were killed or who killed them if it happened. Parliament declared, in the document Titulus Regius, that the two boys were illegitimate, on the grounds that Edward IV's marriage was invalid, and as such Richard was heir to the throne. He was crowned Richard III in July 1483. Defeat of the House of York. Richard III had many enemies, including the Lancastrian sympathisers, who now rallied behind Henry Tudor, the House of Tudor being closely linked with the House of Lancaster. A coup attempt failed in late 1483, but in 1485 Richard met Henry Tudor at the Battle of Bosworth Field. During the battle, some of Richard's important supporters switched sides or withheld their retainers from the field. Richard himself was killed, the last Plantagenet king and the last king of England to die in battle. Henry Tudor declared himself king, took Elizabeth of York, eldest child of Edward IV, as his wife, symbolically uniting the surviving houses of York and Lancaster, and acceded to the throne as Henry VII, founder of the Tudor dynasty which reigned until 1603. Later claimants, the de la Pole family were sometimes suggested as heirs to the Yorkist cause, but Henry Tudor and his son Henry VIII of England efficiently suppressed all such opposition. Another Yorkist branch descends from George Plantagenet, 1st Duke of Clarence, and younger brother of Edward IV. The heir to this branch is the Earl of Loudoun, currently Simon Apney Hastings. There was in Edward IV's reign a suspicion that this king was illegitimate. In 2004, the British station Channel 4 revived the George branch's claim as Britain's real monarch. The Earls of Loudoun would then, at least, be the heirs to the Yorkists. Legacy. Upon Henry Tudor's uniting the rival houses of Lancaster and York, the title Duke of York became a royal prerogative and is traditionally accorded to the second son of the reigning monarch. Beginning with Richard of Shrewsbury, none of its holders were able to transmit it. They either died without a male heir or succeeded to the throne. The title is held today by Prince Andrew, second son of Queen Elizabeth II and her consort Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. The symbol of the House of York was a white rose, still used as the badge of Yorkshire and Jacobitism. York, Pennsylvania, is known as the White Rose City after the symbol of the House of York. The rivalry between York and Lancaster, in the modern form of the counties of Yorkshire and Lancashire, has continued into the present day on a more friendly basis. Dukes of York. Edward Plantagenet became Edward IV in 1461, thus merging the title of Duke of York and Crown. Yorkist Kings of England, see also, Keir Emptos, Yorkshire, references. External links. The White Rose of York on the History of York website. The Plantagenets on the official website of the British monarchy. The Yorkists on the official website of the British monarchy.